All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. And as part of the Rankin Technical College AWD 1000 Web Development Technologies class, I've been creating a series of video presentations based on the Microsoft Developer Network Learn Web Development series. All right, we're in the JavaScript section and it's time for working with JSON. So as you can see in here, I've got the working with JSON, then there'll be some object building practice. I don't know if we'll go over that or not, but I'm not going to do the assessment there, the adding features to our bouncing balls demo. All right. One thing about JSON, you can go out to json.org.com. I think it's .org. One of the uglier websites that you'll see, but it's good in that goes through some of the intricacies of using the language, all right, and it explains kind of how it's used in here. So we're going to start talking about some of that right now. So as mentioned, JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It's a text-based format for representing structured data. It's commonly used for transmitting data in web applications. Now, another thing that's used for that is something that's referred to as XML or Extensible Markup Language. All right. But as time goes on, it appears as though more and more is being done with JSON. And I think a big part of the reason for that is it's so much more similar to JavaScript syntax than is XML. Okay, says you'll come across it quite often. This article will give you, well, I don't know if it gives you all you need to work with JSON and JavaScript, but it'll get you started, including parsing JSON so you can access data within it and creating your own JSON. As mentioned here, even though it closely resembles JavaScript object literal syntax, JSON can be used independently from JavaScript. Many programming language environments feature the ability to read, also known as parsing, and generating JSON. JSON, as you'll notice right there, exists as a string, which, as mentioned, is useful when you want to transmit data across a network. It needs to be converted into a native JavaScript object, but there are different ways that you can do that. We'll start to get into those momentarily. Converting a string to a native object is known as deserialization. Converting an object to a string is known as serialization. All right. I'm going to quickly give you, and let's see, there used to be an article that I would refer to with this too. All right. So serialization, as it says, it's the act of converting an object into a byte stream. So it's taking an object and breaking it up. And deserialization is the reverse when you put it back together. It's kind of like when you are working with network data and you're working with packets. In other words, these packets can only hold so much. So you take your data and you break it up into multiple packages. All right, so basically you're serializing there. But then on the other end, you have to put them back together again. That's deserializing. The other example I gave, or I give to my classes, and it may or may not be a decent example, I don't know, because I like to give a lot of non-computer examples. All right. Years ago, there was a TV show on called Home Improvement with Tim Allen. And in that show, Tim had his own Toolman show. He was called Tim the Toolman. At the end of the series, what they decided to do was his wife went back and got her, I think, her doctorate in psychology. She was offered a job. They lived in Michigan, and she was offered a job in Indiana. Well, she had put up with him and all of his hijinks for years, so he decided it was his turn to step up for her. So he quit his job, basically, so he could go with her. And they were sitting in their house reminiscing right before they moved. And Jill, his wife, said to Tim, she said, boy, it would be nice if we could just take this house with us. There's so many memories. And Tim said, And at the end, what they showed was them loading the entire house onto a big 18-wheeler, and they were going to move it, presumably, from Michigan to Indiana. Well, imagine that rather than doing it like that, what they decided to do, imagine it was a brick house, and they decided to take it apart brick by brick. All right, that would be serialization. Then when they got to Indiana, if they put it back together again, brick by brick, that would be deserialization. That's kind of the way I look at it. Hopefully that makes a little bit more sense. All right. A JSON string can be stored in its own file, which has a .json extension in it. And if you use MIME types, the MIME type would be application/JSON. All right. As it says, JSON is a string whose format very much represents a JavaScript object literal. There are a couple changes, though. Notice that when you do this, what goes on the left, which is the name or the key, must be in double quotes. What goes on the right must be in double quotes unless it's a numerical value, as shown right there. As mentioned here, you can include the same basic data types inside JSON as you can inside of a standard JavaScript object. In other words, strings like you see here, numbers like you see here. All right. This would be an array like you see here. Booleans, I don't know if there's any, there's one right there. And other object literals. So we've got here, it looks like 1. So we've got here Superhero Squad, and the members are Molecule Man, Madam Uppercut, and Eternal Flame. So it says if we loaded this string into a JavaScript program, parsed it into a variable called superheroes, for example, we could then access the data inside, and it would look very similar to the dot type of notation that we've been using. So you could do it either this way or the array way. And you can even, when you're doing this, as it says, drill down further into the hierarchy. So what do we have? Superheroes, that would be our variable name. Members, all right, members 1, which would be the second object. Remember, we start at 0. And powers, which would be the third one. So let's see. 0, 1. So the powers here would be, this one would be superhuman reflexes, as far as I know. It says we've made the JSON above more available inside a variable in our JSON.text. Or did they? Well, they're not showing it there, and that's okay. We could just come in here and try this. So we could come in and grab every bit of this. Come back into our program that we have been using. Remove this person class because we're not using it anymore. Paste this in. And let's see, I have no idea if this will work or not, but Well, we have to say something like superheroes equals this, I think. Oops, come on. And let's try doing this one. See if we get anything. Like I said, this very well might not even work, so. Superhuman reflexes. Is that what we said we should get? Remember, what this was the second member's third power. Second member, which is right, there's 0, there's 1, third power. Superhuman reflexes. Just to make sure, let's change it to the next one, and we'll make it the first one. So we should have immortality if we do this one right. So I'm going to change this to 2, and I'm going to change this one to 0. And see if we, after we run this, if this changes in here from superhuman reflexes to immortality. And it does. Great. All right. All right, this seems like a good place to break, so we'll break it right here on arrays as JSON in just a couple minutes. In fact, you know what? Let's give it a couple more minutes here. So as we mentioned, the JSON text basically looks like a JavaScript object inside of a string. We can also convert arrays to and from JSON. So this would be an array in here. I think that's what we showed anyway. It's perfectly valid JSON. Said you just have to access array items by starting with the array index. We already did some of that. So JSON is purely a string with a specified data format. It contains only properties, no methods in here. JSON requires double quotes to be used around strings and the property names, sometimes referred to as keys. Single quotes are not valid other than surrounding the entire JSON string. So double quotes all the time is what they're saying when you have to use quotes. Even a single misplaced comma or colon can make this not work. So in other words, it's picky. All right. JSON can actually take the form of any data type that's valid for inclusion inside of JSON, not just arrays or objects. So for example, a single string or number would be valid JSON. Unlike JavaScript code, in which properties may be unquoted, in JSON, only quoted strings may be used as properties. All right, so we will stop here, and then we'll take a look at this active learning working through a JSON example in just a couple minutes.